Hi, everybody, and welcome to Fireside Chat. This Friday, we have joining us Karen Strawn. And
Hey.
yeah, hi, Karen. And we have our guest Stardusk,
Hello.
also known as the Thinking-Ape. Which one do you prefer, actually?
I've had the handle Stardust for almost 20 years. Thinking-Ape kind of makes sense, but just call me Stardust. Everyone does. It's fine.
All right, cool. So we're just gonna basically just be having a chat, just like sort of talking and chewing the fat, as it were. But I thought, we were talking before the show, and I thought this was kind of interesting. We had a show last night, and we call it the Voice of MGTOW. We brought on guys that self-identified as MGTOW just to give their thoughts, and we also read some letters from people who had had some thoughts or some personal anecdotes they wanted to share, and we just let the guys take the floor and sort of hash it out. And Stardust, you said that you listened to parts of it.
I
Can
did,
you
yeah.
you want to go into it a little bit, or just what your general impressions were from what little you heard?
Well, I mean, I can say that to some extent, I sense some hostility from people who I didn't know which one of the people on that panel identified as going their own way or not. But I mean, there was one, the Yo Axes guy, and some. I mean, I know of him. And I didn't really get a personally a MGTOW vibe from the conversation. I mean, it, if I could just sort of summarize what I got from it, I think people object to the idea of defining things, and there are. I mean, I don't think MGTOW can be rigidly defined as a concept, but I mean, for me, the whole debate about, say, married, it's ridiculous. It wasn't even a question. I mean, if you're married, you can't be mixed. That's fine. I mean, if you're married, that's great if you like that. But the idea that you can be going your own way when, no matter how nice your wife is or whatever, when you're essentially I mean, whether like it or not, a slave to the state is ridiculous. So if that is even an idea. Why that was debated is beyond me, and I said it at the time, I think, as well. And I just sensed, I heard a lot of things I've heard before, accusations of cultishness and what have you, and it was I didn't really recognize very much of MGTOW in it, but I did check out parts of it because people said I should, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right. Just for a little bit of context, everyone was on the show, with the exception of Yobi Axis, was identified anyway as MGTOW, or at least sympathetic to what men going their own way was doing.
Hmm.
And I think they're all either kind of figuring it out, or they're doing their own um, you know just sort of like figuring out where they stand as far as that whole marriage thing. But Yobi Axis originally came in, I think, to try to take a stand, or stand for the other side, or whatever it is. And for the most part, though, he was met with some very reasonable guys. I guess he was expecting some radical, reactions, and he didn't get them. And it turned out that he was pretty enlightened by the end of it. But
Yeah, I mean, I do have something I've never understood is this radicalism that they talk about. I think this is a red herring. I mean, I'm not. I mean, when people talk about, say, the radicalism of MGTOW, I'm often at a loss because it's very rare that they cite examples. I mean, sometimes they'll cite the idea of hypergamy, but they don't challenge specific things people say. They'll say, "Oh, MGTOW are just radicals." They're saying, women are, all women are like a certain way. They never say which way we claim them to be. So, I mean, it's very difficult to engage people if they're going to just be so unspecific about what their problem is with ideas. Because to me, I've said this before, and about the conflict that existed. It's kind of died down between, say, me and Sam and people like that. I mean, there's no coherent idea about what men going their own way really is. To me, apart from not getting married, it's just about doing your own thing. And additionally, for me, it's very important to understand human nature and the way the world works, and um, that isn't shared by everyone. And to understand human nature and the way the world works, you got to take human beings under a microscope and see what they do. And I don't find anything objectionable about that. And I'll point out, I'd like to point this out, is that that's exactly what Karen does too. But of course, and many of my views align with hers, and that's why I'm fond of her, among other reasons. But when she points things out, for example, one thing, I'll just give you an example. I'm running my mouth off. Should I stop or?
No, 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 keep going.
Okay, so here's
I
something.
always enjoy flattery in any form. So.
All right. So here's the thing. I think Karen and I would both agree that there's a relationship between feminism and women, and that you don't need the everyday Jane, say the everyday woman, if you want to call her, plain Jane. She might not be a feminist. She might not have any knowledge of it, but there's a sort of tacit complicity in all the legislation that's been passed and all the things that have come to pass in the past 4 or 5, 6 decades. Women just sat there and let it happen. They weren't worried about the outcome. And so MGTOW, and I'll say this myself, yeah, many of us, not everyone, would say that, feminism, for example, is something separate from women, but there's a tacit complicity on the part of women for their own just essential indifference to the outcome of all the things that have come to pass over the past couple of years. I mean, you can disagree. I think Karen would agree with that largely.
I would. I think it goes back further than the last 50 years. I mean, even looking at the question of women's suffrage, right? You essentially had an extremely strong contingent of women. The majority of women up until like the 1910s opposing women's suffrage. Well, why did they oppose it? Because they didn't want the male obligations. They did not want the citizenship obligations that went along with the vote that men had. And they were very, very eloquent in their expression of that. There were other concerns that they had. They thought that anyone who had the vote without that obligation would be an irresponsible voter. They felt that their husbands were one with them and chosen by them. Their fathers loved them. Their brothers also loved them, and their sons were our sons are what we have made of them, and therefore we can trust them to act in our stead at the ballot box. I mean, like, there were all kinds of very logical reasons why women opposed suffrage. And when you look at how suffrage came about, most of the opposition stopped when it became clear that women would be given the franchise without the commensurate responsibilities. That essentially, and I've said this before, and God, I don't remember where, but I said that the average woman, or even the traditionalist woman, looks at the changes feminists have brought about the way looters see a race riot. They don't believe in the cause. They don't believe Black Lives Matter. They just see it as an opportunity to smash a window and grab some stuff, right? They're not invested in necessarily in the cause of women's equality. In fact, they're highly opposed to the cause, a lot of them, of women's equality. But if they can smash a window and run off with some stuff as a result of the changes feminism brought about, then they're happy to do that, and that's, I think, why they've been so complicit in this, and why you have someone like Phyllis Schlafly saying, essentially, women had all these privileges before, feminism, and now they have more privileges, and so I want to block the ERA because it would take away all of these traditional women's privileges and also the other privileges and exemptions that they've earned since then, and all of the rights that they've earned since then that don't come with responsibilities, and it would erase all of that and make us equal, and I don't want that, and most women don't want that. Well, of course they don't, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to take the benefits that have come along, right?
And Barbarossa has pointed this out many times, that, say, in the year 2000, late 2015, where we are now, that it seems highly unlikely that women en masse, whatever their opposition to the ideology of feminism might be, would say something like, let's get rid of the WIC and the welfare programs. We need to shrink the government. I mean, there are these sort of lip service women libertarians, and there have been some interesting talks about that in the community. And we've talked about this before. At the end of the day, if shit hit the fan, they'd be sucking female dick. They probably like sucking female dick, and they're certainly not going to want to dismantle the welfare system in the name of opposing feminism, because all of those benefits came about through feminist ideology, many of them at least. But as you pointed out, women have benefited directly and indirectly from that, whether they're declared feminists or not. And I think this is something that when MGTOW point this out, people get angry and say we're extremist. You point this out, I have this feeling that they just gloss over it. I don't know if it's sort of like female hypoagency going there, but simply acknowledge that women en masse are not really on the side of men so much is something that's considered radical and extremist. I just think it's a factual observation.
No, a woman's always going to be on her own side first and foremost. I mean, like, there are exceptions, right? There are exceptions when it comes to her son, who's been falsely accused of rape. But, as in the case of Judith Grossman, you have this situation where she was marching at the barricades to get all of these changes put in place, to protect women, despite the fact that she had a son, right? And it wasn't until it was her son, right? And so it's almost like she doesn't even necessarily see, it's almost like she has to see it through the lens of her own victimization. She's been victimized as a mother because her son has been done wrong by all of these changes that have been brought about by feminism, right? That's what motivated her to actually, and I'm actually quite impressed with her, because I thought it was going to be that one article and that would be the end of it, that she wrote for, oh fuck, what was it, New York Post or some shit, Wall Street Journal or whatever, right? But essentially, she's gone on to help found a organization trying to restore due process on American campuses, which is very, very good, and I'm very glad she's doing that. I think that that's good work to do. But at the same time, it actually took her own son being victimized by this before she kind of realized that what was being done was unfair.
Yeah, I can't speak for everyone. I think this is important to stress that I'm just one guy. Whatever my status or lack thereof is, these are just my views, and they don't necessarily represent everyone else's. But I mean, in my amateur studies of evopsych and evolutionary biology, I mean, the impression I've continually gotten is that, for the most part, when women care about men, their genetic relatives, in particular, son, direct progeny, that's when they can actually start noticing things that happen to brothers or sons or maybe fathers. When you take the blood out of the picture, as you you sort of pointed out in the case of Judith Grossman, plenty of the stuff that happened to her son has happened to other men before or after, same time. She just never paid attention to it because they're not related to her.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we have some questions. Can MGTOWs have waifus or husbandos? I would be able to maybe answer that if I knew what the fuck they were. And
I don't know what the hell that is either.
Brian, don't criticize me for not knowing what a waifu is. Somebody actually told me ages ago, and I've forgotten.
Oh, a waifu is basically an imaginary girlfriend. It's like those, I don't know, like the guys that are really into anime, they buy those pillows and stuff. That's basically what a waifu is. And I think it's part gag, but yeah. As long as a waifu can't take you to court and like steal all your shit, right?
I mean, that's like saying, can you have a sex toy? Pretty much. Well, of course you can if you want one.
Yeah, or you can like read novels and stuff, and imagine things. Okay, what happens when men adopt the same in-group preference for
Never gonna happen.
I agree. I was gonna say never gonna fucking happen.
Never gonna happen.
Biologically, just absolutely contraindicated.
Wait. I want to be fair. Maybe when we figure out how to completely re-engineer the human genome from the ground up, maybe it'll happen then. If we wanted to, but
no, but I don't think there's even remotely a hope. This is for me, it's one of the biggest crimes that feminism has committed is this sort of patriarchy conspiracy, which is entirely based on the idea that men have an in-group preference towards other men against women. That's the entire basis of it, is that men can feel this way, right?
Yeah.
And men can't, and I don't think that they will ever be able to develop that kind of psychological profile. And so essentially, what they seem to have done is they've taken their own in-group preference, and I could go into all kinds of shit about chimpanzees and bonobos and all kinds of their behaviors and how they form coalitions and all this shit. Okay, but what I'm going to say is women took their own methods of relating to other women, forming coalitions with other women in specific contexts of, in their own, within their own larger group, their own society, right? And they projected that on men and said, that's what men have been doing all this time. No, it's what women have always done, right? Men don't do it. Men are incapable of it.
Well, because frankly speaking, in order to be reproductively successful, men have to be pitted at each other's throats in a way that women aren't, often violently, certainly in past times, such that, in-group preference would be, I don't know how that would work within the dominance hierarchy, because you need to be competitive against each other, and showing a kind of same gender favor would disrupt that, I think. And
well, I think too, you look at like, because there are female dominance hierarchies, of course there are.
Well, right, but it's not the same sort.
Yeah, no, it's not. It operates on completely different mechanisms, and it's much more sort of fluid and relaxed and a little bit less brutal. But those hierarchies are focused on access to resources. The male dominance hierarchies are all focused on access to one resource, sex, right? Yeah. So it's essentially saying that, like, women are focused on resources, so they're going to fight over who has the nicest house, right? They're going to compete over who has the prettiest living room furniture, or who has the nicest hair and can attract the most, the wealthiest mate, or whatever, right? They're going to compete with each other on those lines, but they definitely, because of the way they have existed close to home, and you can see there's evidence of this in the way they navigate, there's evidence of this in all kinds of things, being close to home among other women most of the time, right? Whereas men have very much, they have shallower, they have more capability of maintaining more relationships on a shallower level, where everybody is expendable and replaceable, because that's the way they have to operate, and all of these things. It's completely fucking different how men and women form bonds with their same-sex peers, right? And to think that men could compete for the resource of female sexuality by essentially ganging up on women, right?
Yeah.
Or committing some kind of, like you have this whole idea of female genocide and femicide and all of these things, right? That it's like some patriarchal norm. Yeah, no, it's not. It's against men's reproductive interests.
Yeah.
I have a question from the chat. I'm going to read the next one.
Sure.
Since going your own way, have you asked yourself how long you plan on continuing the production of your content, and why?
Yeah, well, that seems pretty topical. I don't have any intention of really officially ever stopping, although sometimes I'm tempted to take a break, or long break. I think a lot of what's relevant to this question as well is that a lot of people feel that, and I think it was mentioned in the talk with the gentleman the other night, that everything's kind of been said and done. And I suppose in a sort of core level that's true, But there are a lot of things I want to continue exploring within the realm, as I said, of human nature, you know, mating strategies and social interaction. And to that end, I still want to make videos. They tend not to be terribly popular, and I think it's a shame. MGTOW really is strongest when it's in terms of what the people that are attracted to it, when you kind of just go over those core topics, even ad nauseum. But for me, yeah, I don't have any, you know, unless I'm dead or deathly ill. You know, I think I'll be around for a while yet, or
Yeah.
whatever. So,
I think when we were talking, because we talked a little after the show yesterday, and one of the reasons why it came up as a question was there is like there's a balance between making content at a reasonable rate that is still, you know, delves deeper into these like you were saying, these mating strategies and the just the, you know, the makeup of men and women evolutionarily, psychologically, and so on, that can be really interesting, and understanding you know, human behavior. And then, but you know, you also have the other side of that where you're producing stuff because you put yourself on a schedule to produce stuff. Not to rag on, you know, or like to, you know, put anyone on the spotlight here, but for example, Sandman has said he wants to make a video every day. Well, the downside of doing that is he has to produce a video every day about something. So you end up
yeah, that's
doing the
difficult.
same kind of stuff, you know, because you've put yourself in a position where you're like, I got to make a video today. I don't know what I'm going to talk about, you know.
Frankly, you know, I'll be honest, and you know, maybe this is a bit of disclosure. For a while this year, I produced quite frequently, and I didn't like ultimately the content I was making towards the end of that. You know, from my standards, I was producing like 15 videos a month. So that's a lot for me. And I mean, some people said it wasn't too bad. I ultimately, if I have a choice, part of it is yeah, quality over quantity, but I'm also not going to lie. I mean, my channel helps me significantly to survive and make a living. It's not the only thing, but so that's part of it as well. But if it were up to me, yeah, I mean, I would focus less on those really kind of basic things because it's been talked about a million times. But I realize, you know, that's the kind of thing that appeals to more people. I plan at some point in time making a video about something called assortative mating, which, you know, maybe Karen's familiar with it, maybe she's not, but basically when you engage in mating strategies based on similarities of appearance and so on and so forth. I mean, that's not something that necessarily appeals to a lot of people, but something I find interesting. So yeah, I don't plan on going away, but I think as I'll probably be producing fewer videos over time, and because I want to focus on things that I find interesting, and hopefully some of my subs find interesting. There are always going to be new people to MGTOW ideas and concepts, and I mean, I don't want to get off the topic, but a lot of that has to do with the so-called red pill rage phase. You might be familiar with, of course.
Yep.
And where you're just really, and I briefly experienced that, and I think Barbaros actually experienced that longer than I did.
Oh yeah.
And I can sort of commiserate a little bit, but that energy, you know, to that kind of thing, when you're in that state, it really helps to be exposed to some of these basic topics. But you know, I don't really. I'm not certainly not angry about any of this stuff. I'm pretty just sort of dispassionate and detached from it. So for me to, sometimes it's helpful to review these things, but yeah. One thing that I've talked about with friends is the problem I find. This is just once again my own view, is that so much of the things that we would like to explore in the MGTOW community, some of us at least, are off limits in an academic sense. I mean, for example, things about, you know, divorce statistics, and overwhelmingly, no matter what the country is, you know, women tend to initiate divorce more. That's not the subject of study in any academic setting whatsoever. But it's interesting. It has important political, sociological, and economic consequences to it, and nobody does it. So I almost feel, as being sort of an amateur content producer, being interested in essentially sort of scientific and psychological topics, that you're really
underserved by the academic.
Exactly. You have to go out on your own. There's oftentimes a dearth of availability of information and things to sort of bolster what you're looking into. And this I find is one of the worst things out there, because it's just stuff that's untouchable in an academic sense, and it makes it all the more reason easier to sort of shoot down. Oh, they're just bitter, blah blah blah. No, you can find some things. I'll never. I mean, there's the famous sort of Rutgers study, I think it was from 2004, about women in group preference. But for example, what would be great? Why don't we have hundreds of studies on women in group preference, and
Yeah.
explain why it evolved and how it came about and how it works in the modern context? We don't have anything like that, and it would be
No.
really helpful.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and just relational aggression.
Yeah.
That's something that's absolutely the idea of mean girls and queen bees is as a form of violence, as a form of aggression, is and abuse is like almost entirely it's like a product of the last decade or two of research. And women's sexual coercion against men, also really, really new, very, very underfunded, understudied. Um, Nobody's even taken into consideration. I mean, we've had all these theories, we've had entire books, Thornhill and Palmer's A Natural History of Rape, right? Um, that look into the causes of male sexual coercion, right? And we don't have anything like that. We have plenty of data on self-reports of women sexually coercing men. Um, uh, some of them have numbers that are much more scary than the scariest numbers feminists put out about men, about like say college students. 1 out of 3 college men would say said they would rape if they could get away with it, which is a bogus study to begin with. But okay, 1 out of 3. Well, 40% of women say that they've done it to a man. Not that they would if they could get away with it, but that they have done it, right? And we have that data, right? But nobody wants to look into the why. Even someone like Gad said, he was actually quite surprised by me saying, "Oh yeah, no, there's actually data on prevalence of this."
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Right?
yeah, and my friend C.S. MGTOW, he is in a position to talk to academics. He tried to contact, I believe it's 45, in any event, over 40 accomplished neuroscientists who specialize in studying sex differences in the brain. That is, the irrefutable data we have now showing that there are asymmetries between men and women in terms of brain volume, distribution of gray-white matter, so on and so forth.
Yep.
They all were
Corpus
they didn't want to talk to him. They were afraid.
Oh yeah,
Overafraid.
of course they are. Of
And
course.
and I mean, and now we have things called neurosexism. You know, we can't afford, I think, at this day and age, to be afraid of potential consequences, which, in my view, are unforeseen. We don't know what's going to happen. Um, at the risk of losing access to accurate and factual knowledge and understanding the way we work. I mean, it's pretty obvious that we're sexually dimorphic. We still don't know a lot about the differences in the male and female brain. And it would be really helpful getting this knowledge out to the public. But if academics are, for example, terrified of talking about it,
Yeah.
this doesn't help. And to me, someone who's passionate about knowledge and understanding the world, this is the worst thing that feminism has done. I mean, I know a lot of people, if it feels more than I never wanted to get married anyway, and the whole family, that didn't really interest me. But the fact that you can't have open and honest discourse for fear of maybe being fired or being reprimanded or threats even or whatever, this is absolutely the worst consequence of our feminized society, in my view.
Hmm. Oh yeah, because it makes people uncomfortable, and it makes people think that their utopian vision might be impossible to bring about. And they should feel that, because every time somebody thinks that there is a utopian vision they can bring about, then like 20 fucking million people die.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I wish we could. I feel that there's pushback against this. I recently made a video. I think this whole splintering, say, of the left between progressives and sort of more moderates, I think people are just getting more and more interested in facts and understanding the world rather than specific political allegiances. But I might be wrong about that.
I think it's more a divide between progressive authoritarian and progressive libertarian.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
although like just essentially, there are two camps on the right as well who, the right used to be extremely authoritarian. The whole free speech movement in the 60s was a leftist movement. Um, but it was about freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of association, all of those things, right? Against the right-wing establishment in universities in the U.S. Now we have the exact opposite thing going on in universities in the US. We have the same totalitarianism, the same authoritarianism. It's just a leftist one. So it's essentially it's two axes that we operate on, and there are people who you don't necessarily have to be centrist to be authoritarian, to be a libertarian in your approach to freedom of speech and all of that. I think that Jonathan Haidt was one who said, I used to be a leftist, now I'm a centrist. I don't think he is. I don't think he's a centrist now. I think his values are just as left as they ever were, but he is more open to the idea that without some sort of other opinion that gets heard on occasion, that the echo chamber causes just more and more polarization, more and more radicalization. I mean, the moment that you have a sealed off community that's in opposition to another community and they're sealed off, all of the direction of travel in their ideology and their values is away from center. All of it. It's all to the more radical end. And the more people move to the more radical end, the more the people who were at the center will shift along with them and adopt new ideas, and it's just the way things are, right? And I think that he sees the value of other voices. I don't think he's changed his leftist values. I think he just sees the value of other voices to keep the left honest.
Yeah. I have another question from the chat, if that's okay. I wonder if Karen is aware of Susan Brown Miller's Myrmidon theory. It's similar to the one good man myth, only she draws the opposite conclusion.
What, that all men are shit? What?
I'm not sure. It's called the Myrmidon theory. I don't know what that means, though.
The Myrmidon is a mercenary soldier taken from the Greek. I don't know specifically in this context what it means, but that's what it means. Well, that's the word. Yeah.
If he could expand on that a little bit and describe it, I'm not aware of it. At least not by that name. Although
we can get back to that. Maybe are there any other?
I'll Google it and I'll get some more information. In the meantime, I'll ask the next question. This one should be good. Why do women react with such anger against MGTOW when one would think that they would rejoice as it's just one less man to deal with?
Yeah. Well, actually, sometimes you do get women rejoicing, saying, one less shitty man out of the gene pool or something like that. So I guess that's kind of
but I think that's sour grapes. It really is. It's essentially, in my opinion, the reason why women get so upset about this is because they're inherently sexually narcissistic.
Oh, absolutely. I pointed out in sorry, go on.
No, you go ahead.
Well, it's that whole thing about gay misogyny that recently came up.
Fuck's sake.
It's just, and I made a video about it, and I legitimately think sometimes women are shocked that a man could not be, obsessed with their vaginas.
Captivated by them. That's why they're obsessed with their vaginas. I mean, like, they think men are obsessed with their penises. No, men, maybe 3 times a day, tug on the thing until it pukes. That's the extent of their obsession with their penises, right?
Yeah.
Women write poems to their fucking vaginas, right? They crap eggs full of paint out of their vaginas onto canvases in front of crowds of people. They insert skeins of wool into their vaginas and then knit, right, without taking a break for their period. Because, a nice striped pattern is really nice. Feminists are fucking obsessed with their reproductive parts, with their vaginas. They'll accuse men of being obsessed with them, right? But from everything I've seen, men aren't. They joke, they might be like, oh yeah, my dick's huge, right? And that's the extent of it, right? Oh yeah, I got a big dick, can't fit it in my pants, and there you go. That's as far as it goes. They're not like,
No.
what things can I learn from my penis? You know,
But
what does my penis say about me? No, like,
at the
come on.
core of this, though, I think it's basically. I mean, this is something that people don't like MGTOW saying, but at the end of the day, men are interested in women primarily because of the physical stuff, the sexual stuff. And women are aware of this. And so they project this into the world. They realize that their primary asset is their sexuality and their physical appearance. And not every MGTOW-minded man, but many MGTOW, including myself, I haven't had sex in over 4 years, and it doesn't really bother me terribly. There are a lot of men, if we really legitimately don't care, that's threatening, at least on an individual level. I mean, how, or at the very least, they can't fathom it.
Well,
What do you mean?
if your primary form of power, including political power, right, including lips that touch liquor will never touch ours, right? Lysistrata, all of this other shit that goes on. Was Salome dancing in front of frickin' Herod? Bring me the head of John the Baptist. Um, you know, if women's power to act, even in the political sphere, is centered around their sexual allure, right, or all of the things that make them female in relation to the male, um, then the losing that power is a huge fucking deal. I mean, without men wanting to fuck them, right? What man could be shamed for man spreading if he didn't want to fuck women? If he was just like completely indifferent to women? I
Yeah,
mean, it's not that Milo Yiannopoulos just that he can get away with saying really outrageous things about women. It's
he doesn't
that
care.
he doesn't fucking care.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and there's a strength in that, and I think women are rightly worried about that. Now, I don't think that, frankly speaking, whether that's good or bad, most men can get to that state, heterosexual men, where they just don't really care.
Mhm.
If they do, I think it's an age thing. You have to have that experiences. I had, for my taste, enough sexual experiences in relationships in my teens and 20s and early 30s, and so I can sort of just look back and then think, oh, but yeah, if you are that way, then yeah, I mean that can be quite threatening. So I think that's pretty much where the anger comes from. You say, "What? You're not interested in fucking me? What's wrong with you?" Yeah,
Yeah, you're not interested in fucking me, then how will I get you to buy me drinks?
yeah, pretty
Right?
much. Yeah,
Or care about whether I live or die, care about whether I get a daycare subsidy, care about this, care about that, right? If you're not interested, like this is really the thing, is that women's power has relied so much on their sexuality over centuries and centuries, right? That they don't, and I think they're terrified of other forms of power. That they're terrified to. It's like they're like holding an armed warhead, and they're like, what do I do with this now, right? Like they don't know what to do with it. Um,
yeah,
and so that's why you get Kirsten Gillibrand getting, screaming sexism, because a couple of her colleagues very, very calmly took her aside in private and mentioned that, she was getting fat and it might not serve her public image. That's like sexism. That's institutionalized sexism, right? Whereas everybody and his dog can call Rush Limbaugh like a gigantic fat fuck on the radio, and men never in politics never get criticized about their looks. The top 10 ugliest politicians, all men, but they never get criticized about their looks, right?
yeah.
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 I found that quote. It's basically the one thing that we know Susan Brown Miller for. So I'll read it for you real quick.
Okay.
Radical feminist theories of sexual violence also have a fourth feature in common. They are commonly misunderstood or even widely distorted by their critics. For example, of all 4 points, consider Susan Brown Miller's Myrmidon theory of stranger rape as presented in our Against Our Will book, I guess she wrote in
Yeah.
1975. Her groundbreaking historical and theoretical discussion of rape as a political force. At the end of the first chapter, Brown Miller famously writes that man's discovery that his genitalia could serve as a weapon to generate fear must rank as one of the most important discoveries of prehistoric times. along with the use of fire and the first crude stone axe.
Oh,
From
that is
prehistoric times,
so
Fucking
bullshit.
retarded.
I believe
Um,
rape has played a critical function. It is nothing more or less than a conscious process of intimidation by which all men keep all women in a state of fear.
all men? Yeah.
All men keep all women in a state of fear. That's like the one. That's like her biggest quote. That's like her fucking.
Yeah.
You can't take that. I mean, who takes that seriously?
Okay, I can understand. Like, okay, I can take it seriously in the context of Tutsis and Hutus, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I can take it in that context seriously. That rape can be used as a weapon of war and terror.
Yeah, I
That
mean,
rape
historically
can,
it has been, yeah.
but okay, but it's not about all men keeping all women in a state of fear. Do you think Hutu women were terrified by their Hutu men who were raping Tutsi women? Yeah, no, they weren't. They were egging them on. They
Yeah.
were cheering them on. They were cheering them to slaughter Tutsi men and boys, and they were cheering them on, ululating them to rape Tutsi women, right? And then when the war ended and the Tutsi, what was it, the RPF or whatever, they took over Kigali, right? Then it switched around, and you had Tutsis taking retribution and killing Hutu men and boys and frickin' raping Hutu women. But, like, okay, so men realize that they can use this as a tool of warfare. That does not mean that they have ever considered this something that is appropriate to use on their own women.
Yeah. I mean, it's I can't take quotes like that seriously, so.
Yeah. Okay, I got another question.
Mhm.
Is going MGTOW easy? Does life eventually get easier? A constant criticism coming from the PUA community is that men cannot be happy without a pussy interest being the only interest.
Yeah. Well, I hear this often, and I think it's a very individual thing. I've never been particularly obsessed with sex, and I Barbarossa's put this quite well. I think once you've had enough sex, the idea of sort of pussy novelty, was the term he used at the time, kind of wears off. My feeling, and I'm not a keen observer of the PUA community, that a lot of the older PUAs, like Nick Krauser and these other guys, over time, that whole pussy novelty is worn off for them. They're not as vociferous as they used to be. It gets easier just because your hormone levels drop, and it's kind of like you get older and you realize it's not that big a deal. And unless you, even then, I mean, I'm thinking about the best sex I had was with some ancient girlfriend of mine, and then of course I had sex many times after that, but it never was quite as good. And I just thought, and there were times in the past when I would have sex, and I just felt like I was just going through the motions because I was supposed to do it. Now I realize that's not reflective of everyone's experience, but it definitely can get easier. And I mean, people don't like this analogy. To me, sex is like just taking a nice dump. You're done, whatever. I mean, people say you can't compare it. It's so well. I can
Except
compare it.
you
I do
can,
compare
and
it.
you did, and you'll do it again.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, I think it can. Not for everyone, but I think the potential exists for everyone that it can get easier, and yeah, for sure.
I
Yeah.
think it depends on the guy. I mean, like I think PUAs take a lot of heat for being pussy beggars, but essentially, like, or thinking that the pussy interest is the only proper interest, right? But I think that there's a huge amount of variance across the male population in terms of sex
I
drive
agree.
and all of that. And so I can't really condemn these guys for
I wouldn't
yeah,
condemn them. I
no.
think there's friction, or has been historically friction, between MGTOW and say PUA, because PUA insists that all men have to conform to this, whereas I find that, generally speaking, MGTOW don't. I mean, uh, let's be frank. My friend Barbarossa is far more libidinous than I am, and
Yeah.
he would never. he would never say, "Oh my God, Stars, what's wrong with you? You haven't said." I mean, we don't even talk about that stuff.
Yeah.
It was neither of us find it particularly interesting. So I agree with you. It's on a spectrum, and everyone's different. It's just PUAs just insist that if you're not going after it, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, I think that's really it's an unfortunate attitude, and I think I see that attitude on the part of like both sides. That a lot of MGTOWs are like, oh, they're just pussy beggars, and then a lot of PUAs are like, oh, they're just omega beta, like freaking whatever the letter is, the Greek letter is of the week. Um, so essentially you have these two sides attacking each other for just like taking different approaches that work for them, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I
I mean,
suppose that I do find overall that within the
PUAs are
MGTOW
much
community,
more.
yeah, because there's this flexibility. Barbaros has been in a long-term relationship for over 2 years now. There are guys who just don't do relationships like me. There are guys who are in between who date.
Yeah.
There are guys who, hire escorts. There's just everything in between. So
Yeah.
it, just so I do think it depends on the spectrum. I do get messages, though, I should mention, from guys who want to go their own way. It's just I can't get past it. I have to fuck. I just have to, and that's not something that I can, maybe because I have a low libido or whatever. I can really relate to. But they love to go their own way. They tell me, I really want to, but I need regular sex, and the best way to do that is in getting a relationship. But I really hate all the bullshit that goes along with it. But I can't get away from that, and so.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like just being with the boyfriend that I'm with, I agree that there are some men who would kind of sink into like this despondency, like absolute despondency without like and it's not just the sex. It's physical intimacy, it's like interpersonal intimacy, it's cuddling, it's spooning, it's all of those things, right? That I think that PUAs don't tend to talk too much about.
Mm.
But I think that part of their fascination with the pussy is a need for human touch and a need for human contact and a need for intimacy and a need for naked skin against skin contact in whatever context.
That's
So,
a nice thing. I would never deny that. It's just, I mean, I think for men who've decided, MGTOW-minded men who decided just to totally dispense with that, well, there are two things. I mean, one thing is that the price that you have to pay for that is often quite high.
yeah.
Dealing with all the bullshit in a relationship and blah, 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 blah. The other thing, and we've talked about this in MGTOW circles, so everyone who's MGTOW probably knows about this concept called male mother need, which is essentially this desire of the male to seek a kind of conditionless or unconditional love from a female partner, and I think that's a fiction. You're never going to
Oh,
get that.
he's not getting it.
No, you get that maybe from your mother. That's why we call it male mother need. But so I think a lot of men, that's a really strong driving force in a lot of men too. It's not just a sexual, but as Karen pointed out, it's a kind of physical intimacy combined with an emotional intimacy. There's someone who's willing to accept you for who you are. At least for a couple of moments, your performance as a doer of things doesn't really matter, and that's a fiction. But I think a lot of men really want that, or at least a simulation of that, and so they keep on chasing it. Yeah.
They do. I see this in my boyfriend all the time, and even just looking at raising children, right? Having babies, and when they're cranky, they're colicky, they have stomach upset, whatever, and the thing to do, really, that would calm them down would be to take off all of their clothes except their diaper and lay them on top of your naked torso. That's essentially the best way to calm a child, is skin against skin, right?
Mm.
And so I think that these things that men feel and that they long for, a lot of them are there's no resolving them. There's no curing them. Men are generally going to want those things, and they're going to feel the lack of them. So.
Yeah, yeah. Or as in my case, I mean, I probably have these latent desires still too, but if you take a sort of hyper rationalistic worldview and just do things that if you realize that that's unattainable, some sort of unconditional love, and realize it's kind of silly to try to pursue it, at least in my view, you can put that aside at least as a major issue and move on with other things that give you pleasure and make life enjoyable for yourself. At least that's how I do it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I think that disappointment, I think, that comes from a lot of men who really feel like they need that and want that and long for that, the unconditional love and the physical intimacy and the physical closeness, whether it comes with sex or not, even. I remember a line from a Law and Order episode that just hit me home. It was an episode where they were prosecuting someone who was selling phony cures for breast cancer to women, and a bunch of women had died, and they were being prosecuted. And one of the men who his wife had tried this, and then she'd gone to regular treatment, and she'd had a double mastectomy, and the defense lawyer asked him on the stand, how's your sex life? And he said, maybe I don't have a sex life, but what I do have is a wife, and it's better than hugging a gravestone. And I think that is the sort of the quintessence, I guess, of what men feel about women. It's not about just about the sex.
It's the companionship. It's having someone there. I mean, men are lonely creatures. We're lonely creatures, far more so than women.
Yeah.
Nobody is always hovering about us, paying attention to us, with a few rare exceptions. It's very easy to not get noticed as a man, and hard to get noticed.
Mhm.
And people just generally don't give a shit. So the idea of wanting to have a companion, with sex or not, who at least ostensibly cares about you or allegedly cares about you, is an appealing notion.
Yeah, there was a guy who wrote a letter in yesterday, and he told us in the letter that he makes six figures, that he's very healthy, tall, in good shape, lives in a big house. He has all of the things that he thinks or thought would have attracted him a mate, but he hadn't. In the same letter, he says he hadn't had sex in 10 years. And some of the guys in the chat were like, how can you have all these things and not have had sex? And I think it's because somebody was like, why don't you just buy a prostitute? Why didn't he just pay for sex? But I
Or
think
have
that
a
the reason...
Top quality escort.
Yeah, or top quality export, which he probably could have afforded very easily.
Yeah,
But I
with the
think
whole
that the
girlfriend,
reason...
for
Yeah,
example.
and this guy is actually, in the letter, he was actually kind of like suicidal in a way. I mean, he was bordering on it or talked about it. I think that the reason is because he wasn't looking just for sex. He wanted something that, no escort could actually give him.
Yeah, and this is actually a really important point that you're bringing up. I mean, as a man, going back, I'm basically 40 now, but in my 20s, and this happens to other men too. I mean, when you realize that you'll never be loved by a woman for who you are, whatever that means, that can be devastating. And most men don't think that way. They think, yeah, I got to go through the motions. I got to work hard and do overtime at work and commute and blah blah blah. And I'll go through that because that's kind of like the entry requirement. But once I get past that, they're gonna love me for who I am.
No.
No, but I think a lot of them think that, and maybe this is what was going through this guy's head. I'm quote unquote successful. I got all this stuff going for myself, but women, they still don't want to know me. What's wrong? And this is devastating because to be a man, as I said, is very much to be alone. I'm an introvert. It's easier for me, I admit, than a lot of guys, I guess, but it's still sometimes difficult. But you have to accept that, I think, and that's really hard to let go of. A lot of the anger comes from that. To say to someone, look, buddy, you're not going to like. I'm going to give you some medicine. You're not going to like it. It's going to taste bad, and it's going to really probably hurt you before you get better. It's going to take a long time for you to get better. But here's the deal. Here's how women look at you. That really hurts. And you get actually anger from women. Women don't. People say you shouldn't look at women that way, but that's the way women look at men, primarily as a means to an end and a provider of resources. In that definition, that loose definition, there's no room for human being.
Well, the problem, though, I think, with a lot of the rhetoric around that is that um, I think that like women are much quicker to attach to a man. Generally, they're much quicker to fall in love.
And
Um,
out of.
yeah, and out of. And I don't think because those bonds, those emotions, all of those feelings are transient and conditional that means that they're not real. I think that in those moments when she's falling for a guy, I think that those feelings are genuine, at least
Oh,
as
I'm
she's
not. I agree with you.
experiencing them. And this is the whole reason why she's experiencing them is because her biology is saying attach to this man because he's a good bet, right? And the whole reason she falls out of love very quickly is because it's like, oh my God, this man just lost his job, and like
Right.
Chris Rock said, oh yeah, we'll get rid of some things, honey. Yeah, the first one is you. Um,
Raul Tomasi put this
yeah,
perfectly well. He says hypergamy doesn't care about ROIs, return on investments.
no,
Um,
it doesn't, and it doesn't count on like on playing the long game, um,
no.
unless you're forced to, which is why no fault divorce is such a problem.
Yeah.
Um, if you're forced to play the long game, you will, and you'll continue to invest in order to repair, your husband's injured his back or whatever, and you'll go to work for a year while he recovers, so that he will be able to go out and get his job back and
Yeah.
then become a provider, and you'll stick it out for that length of time. You'll play the long game, right? But with no fault divorce, you don't have to play the long game. You can just
Right.
sever all ties, and women tend to be find it very, very easy to do this.
I think you bring up a good point. I've never denied the legitimacy of female feelings when they're quote unquote in love. It's just, as you pointed out, they're far more transient and they kind of flicker in and out of existence far more quickly than men. Men, generally speaking, tend to be more attached for greater lengths of time. They do things that recently got a message from a guy who said that he had put his wife through college and all this stuff, and she eventually ran off with his friend. That doesn't surprise me, when she had gotten everything she wanted, essentially. And I think men find this just baffling. And I think I've talked to you before about this. Even you find it baffling the way some women are just able, or even many women, just turn off their feelings and just take him to the cleaners and just, father of her children and all this stuff. And they're
Well,
just able to do that. Yeah.
I don't think they turn off their feelings and then they do that. I think their feelings turn off all
Right,
other,
right, right.
and then because they don't have any feelings anymore about this man, other than that
But
he's
not
now
not
an
even feelings of
inconvenience.
human compassion or honor. That's the thing. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're this scenario I just described, where this guy wrote to me recently. I
Mhm.
mean, I as a man, if someone had, if I had been in a relationship with a woman, some imaginary, where she had put me through 4 years of university, I mean, I would feel almost eternally in debt to her. My honor, my sense
Oh
of
yeah.
honor, would demand that whether I was happy or I probably, just stick through it.
Well, I'm
That's not
sure
how
there
women
I'm
operate.
sure there are male friends too that you've had that have like been so loyal over the years that, if
Yeah,
if
yeah,
if they were to call you and say, "Can you help me hide a body?" You'd be like pulling on your pants
yeah.
at
I mean, this
3
happened to me a
a.m. and
couple of
driving
months
over
ago.
with a carpet, right?
I, yeah, that happened to me. I had to commute to a friend. He was moving in with his pseudo wife, and I didn't really prove that, but it was just a whole lot of work. It was hot. It was heavy. Lots of moving, and but he's been there for me, and he's helped me out, and I kind of just felt obligated. I wouldn't have just said, "Oh no, I'm not going to do that." And yeah, there are other examples of that as well, and
Yeah.
I don't think women feel that way, generally speaking, the same way that
Well,
men
I
do.
think
Yeah.
I think I think it's because the flow of resources and help and support, they're so used to having that flow in the direction toward them, that it never really occurs to them, um, that if they even acknowledge reciprocity, um, it's almost in many cases like it's an inconvenient fact of life. It's not a point of honor. It's sort of just fuck, now I got to do this, right?
Yeah.
Um, and like I had talked to, I mean, like particularly after I divorced and I was dating, and like so many of the men, um, when I was dating in my early 20s, it wasn't like this, right? But then you're dating in your late 30s and early 40s, and all of a sudden it's these like men who've just been put through, several meat grinders by women, and they're kind of shell shocked but still hopeful. And one of them, he lived in Nova Scotia, and he put his wife through a PhD program, like through undergrad and then into a PhD. She got her PhD in psychology. Never worked a fucking day in her life. Right? They had six kids rather, six kids together. Um, he bought them a he. She talked him into working on an oil rig in Alberta, where he would have to fly out for 3 weeks and then back for a week, right? And, just because, we could really use the money, right? And so he did it. He did it for her, right? Because my family needs the money. And I think it was the third time he caught her cheating, right? That he finally said, enough is enough, right? And every time he caught her cheating on him, her excuse was, well, you're never here.
No.
Okay. And now he's paying almost $10,000 a month in alimony and child support so that his ex-wife can live in the farmhouse that he owns on a hobby farm with his six kids and her boyfriend, and neither of them have to work. And he will never be able to leave his job on the oil rig. He's crushed his hand twice, right? He can't leave that job because the amount of maintenance that he's paying, he only needs to be in arrears for a month and a half before he's in jail, right? That's not enough time to apply to have his arrears,
And
his
this
child
is
support.
why MGTOWs, it's essential that men understand the way women view them.
Yeah.
And the hurt feelings and accusations don't matter because MGTOW as a concept and things that can be learned from it can save lives. I mean, this guy, had he known all this stuff, might not have ended up in the situation, this horrible, admittedly horrible situation he's in. Um, I think it's too important. This stuff is too important to know and to acknowledge than to, pay some sort of lip service to, the beneficial nature of women and blah 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 blah.
Oh, and I can imagine there's plenty of women out there who would say, I would never do that.
Of course they wouldn't. No, they never
Yeah,
would, right?
no, but the problem is that you actually have to be in that situation and not do it, right? In order to know that you'd never do it.
Oh yeah, I've had ex-girlfriends. I'd never cheat on you, and then they cheated on me. I mean,
Mhm.
it's it's empty rhetoric on their part. But I mean, once again,
It's
I think
sincere, I think. I think so many women are like totally sincere. I would never do that, right? But so many women say it sincerely and believe it that they would never do it, and then they go ahead and do it, that I have a hard time trusting that. I would rather trust a woman's track record. In fact, I think
absolutely. I
one
mean,
of the reasons it was easier to convince my boyfriend that I could be trusted, was because I was divorced and I had been in that situation and I hadn't done it.
you
Question, Karen, I got a
sure.
question for you about that. Um, did you feel the need to show your boyfriend that you could trust him because you felt that you wanted to do that, or was he kind of like expressing, concern or suspicion?
Oh, he was expressing a lot of concern, and understandably so. Um, Essentially, his previous long-term relationship with he shared well, it's not, she wasn't biologically his, but he raised her helped raise her since she was about 5 months old. And she was 5 when his girlfriend essentially told him over, like 3, 4 days before, she was sending him text messages, your family misses you so much, we're so lucky to have you. And then like 3 days later, she's like, yeah, I want you to move out, over Google Chat. So it really broadsided him, because she was really, either she was into it and then everything just shut off or switched, like sort of on a dime, or she was really good at fooling him into thinking that she was still into it for quite an extended period of time. So he knew that either women are liars, or they are capricious and fickle and arbitrary and will ruin your life just on a moment's notice, just on a moment's feeling.
Yeah.
So
And
that was the lesson he learned. So
okay.
essentially, he asked me. Well, he didn't ask me. He said several times that, I'm so into you. I'm so, like, this is just like, oh my God. But I just keep thinking, right? I just keep thinking that I don't think I can trust this, right? And I don't think I can trust you.
Right. And
And
no,
it took me a long time to convince him that,
yeah.
my ex had about 5 years of yelling, screaming fights, and me trying to tell him that we need to go to counseling, and uh, just all kinds of upheaval, and me saying, if this is what our marriage is if this is all it is, I don't know if it's worth it, and like, there was no way that my ex could not have seen it coming,
Yeah.
right? And then after I made the decision, I didn't fuck him over.
No, that's interesting because I think this brings something that I don't hear a lot of conversation about, but I'm curious about. So I'm sorry if I'm stepping in here, but the I when a woman becomes sort of like red pilled, or gets a broader understanding of what's going on between men and women in the same way that you have. Um, I wonder if that doesn't affect, and I'm fairly certain it does, their approach to relationships from that point on with other men. Because I think that your patience and your devotion to trying to get your current boyfriend to, sort of like, let his guard down enough to trust you and then let you in, is something that I think the vast majority of women will lose patience with, and they'll just be like, well, I'm just going to go somewhere else.
Brian, can I actually have something to say about this? Can I,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, I can actually give you a semi-concrete example. I have a online friend, a female acquaintance, whatever. She's aware of MGTOW stuff, and her sister-in-law is also a fat, lazy exploiter of her brother. And I mean, as in the brother is doing overtime, she does some volunteer work, from my understanding. There's a dog or two in the house. She doesn't really want, he's got to work full time, still walk the dog, that sort of setup. And now she doesn't like that, and she knows about MGTOW concepts, although she seems sometimes reluctant to accept some of the more extreme. I don't like to use the stuff that's sort of more
Cynical.
cynical. Yeah. But she's always worried about becoming that sort of woman, and so I think now, whatever that means. I think that she's gonna lose her hypergamy and all of this other stuff? Of course not. I mean, let's set the record straight again. Karen, for example, has never claimed not to be hypergamous, for example, and although people sometimes attribute that to her. I think what happens is you get kind of more lenient with it. I think the way Karen's described is, he's got to be doing something. It doesn't need to be this or that, but something. Just as an example. But yeah, I think a woman can kind of almost be in her case, she has MGTOW content that she's familiar with vis-a-vis me. And she's got her fat, lazy sister-in-law that she can't stand, and then she's thinking, well, I don't want to end up like that or be that person. So I definitely think that for some people, not all of them, some women, the quote unquote red pill can have a positive effect.
Well, I think too. There's been research done on couples that couples that went into counseling, sort of end of marriage, right at the end of everything's fucking crashing and burning counseling, and they followed couples who repaired their marriage and stayed together, and couples who divorced. And the couples who, of the women who opted to stay in their marriage and just go play the long game, right? They were happier overall than the ones who had decided to leave, just sort of in aggregate, on average. They were glad that they had stuck it out. So I think that essentially what women could benefit to know about themselves is that your emotions are extremely transitory. There's a reason why there's an adage about women being fickle, right? Um, that your emotions are maybe not the best judge of what's going to make you happy. Your emotions in this moment are maybe, like, oh yeah, I'm really excited about this stock. I'm going to invest my entire fortune in it, right? Yeah, no, no. Normally, no matter how excited you are about that stock, you're going to step back and you're going to say, well, okay, I've got this much in savings. Maybe I'll invest half, right? And then I'll play the long game, right? I'll see if it rises, then I'll buy some more, whatever, right? Um, what seems to be the case with most women is that are they are unaware of how their own emotions can actually undermine their happiness long term, right? And they will go from man to man to man. There was a brilliant video that was posted through Red Pill Philosophy's website. It was embedded in the website. I don't know where you can watch it, just other than that, of a guy saying, all these women, is black guy saying, oh, you women, asking where all the good men are. Yeah, well, you know what? You friend zoned them, like um, that women follow their emotions, and it does not result in long-term happiness for them, right?
Well, not just that. They vote with visceral emotion and political things, and
Hmm.
yeah, they. If anything, I agree with you. Women should really pay attention to how I wouldn't say no value, but how little value their emotions often are
Yeah,
in
well,
terms of.
they're certainly not a decent. They're not a replacement for a dispassionate cost-benefit analysis. They're not necessarily the best guide um, when you're thinking of your long-term happiness and stability. And I mean, this is why I waited 5 years from when I started thinking about leaving my husband to when I actually did it. It was 5 years. And and then it was another year after that before I started dating again, right? So that's because I was aware that, okay, well, my emotions sometimes they fuck me up. Sometimes they fuck me over, right? I think I'm going to be happy and then I'm not. Well, surprise, surprise. I didn't take a rational assessment of the situation. I just went with my feelings, right? And that's not the way to manifest any sort of long-term happiness or contentment, right? So I think that if women actually, red pill women, this is the one thing that they can have sort of as an edge over other women, is that they have that sort of meta-analysis of how their emotions can fuck them over, and they're maybe going to be more willing to stick it out over the long haul, weather the bumps, not
Right.
start the clock the moment their guy loses his job, like Chris
Well,
Rock
the
did, right?
the flip side of that, Karen, is that because women are so emotional, if you criticize them for that and say, you need to be less emotional and more detached, they feel offended. They feel hurt. I mean, this is uh, sure, this is the problem, and why it's so
It is a
difficult.
huge problem, particularly, feminist philosophy and feminist ethics and women's ways of knowing and all of this other bullshit that comes into it, where emotional arguments are considered, quote unquote, they're considered less valid than rational ones. No, they are less valid than rational ones. They're considered less valid because they are, and that's not unfair, right?
Yeah,
It's not rationality that leads to genocides. It's emotional thinking that leads to genocides,
Yeah.
right? So the whole bullshit about emotion attacking women's emotions and irrationality. Honestly, I would just tell those women to woman up, right?
yeah.
You know, um,
I think the Shiba Inu, and I don't know who the Shiba Inu is here, but
Oh,
I
it's
didn't know
me.
you. Oh, you're a Shiba Inu. Interesting. Go
Yeah,
on.
yeah, he's got this really creepy animation thing going where like his dog avatar talks when he talks.
It's impressive. It's a nice breed, a very pretty one. Go on.
I like Shiba Inus. I actually almost got one, but they're expensive. Um,
Yeah.
so, while we're on the topic, I was going to ask the next question, but I'm curious about the Reddit called Red Pill Women. And I've never been there. I don't go there, but do you think that, well, I would just ask if you guys ever been there and what your thoughts are about that space, the Red Pill
I,
Women.
I don't know anything myself. I don't know very much about it. Contrary to what people that I don't pay attention to everything going on in the manosphere or the red pillosphere or whatever. Half the time when I find out about something, it's because someone sends me a link or you have to check it out. I don't really know much about it, but I can tell you what my view in general of quote unquote red pill women is. It's a pretty dismal one. I mean, the reason why Karen, I actually get shit sometimes for defending Karen, but I consider Karen to be an ally and I agree with her on a lot of things. It's because she's proven her value and her principles time and time again. To me, and I think for a lot of men, it's not enough for to create a website or hop on the website and say, "Well, I'm a red pill woman." I think men are getting a raw deal. You have to put in the work to show that you actually believe that, and I'm generally quite skeptical of any site claiming to be a red pill woman site. Show me the goods, put in the work, as Karen has for years now, and then maybe I'll believe you.
You know what? You know what would make me believe? Actually, I might just go and post this on Red Pill Women. Maybe post the statement to the state of, I believe it was Missouri, Minnesota, sorry, from the Anti-Suffragette League, right? The Women's Coalition Against Women's Suffrage. Post that statement and then tell them would they be willing to give up their vote?
Yeah.
Because the red pill subreddit, the red pill and red pill women, it is very pickup artisty, right? In that there's a lot of game theory, not game theory in the sense of original, but the pickup artist game theory. But at the same time, there's a hugely traditionalist bent to this, and a lot of these red pill women. I think I went there once, like a year ago, and bitch slapped some of them. Um, but because they were essentially being Phyllis Schlafly, right? I want my cake and I want to eat it too, right? I want my husband to provide for me, but I also want the right to like have my own property and all of these things, right? Yeah, no. If you're entitled to your husband's income, then he's entitled to use your property to the best of his abilities to support you, right? That he should be the administrator. If he's the one with 100% of the financial responsibility, he should have all of the financial assets of the family at his disposal.
I think Karen's right. I mean, in my observation, when I do see these so-called red pill women, they tend to be tradcons most of the time.
Yeah,
They
but
talk
they're
about
not.
things such as real masculinity
But
and
they're
real
not.
men, and,
They're not
and
trad cons in the sense of, yeah, we're willing to give up our
no, no,
property
no.
rights. We're willing to give up our voting rights. We're willing to. We you know, in order to get our men back in the same role that they were in 250 years ago,
Yeah, that's
right?
obviously not.
We only want to concede to, like, you know, oh, okay, maybe we'll take things back to the thing.
Yeah, I don't want to work anymore. I don't want to do this. I don't want him to support me, but I still want to be able to divorce him when I can and all that other
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, yeah. No, like, fuck that shit. You know, honestly, it's the entire, like, we think the 1950s is traditionalism. No, it's not. Traditionalism was like 400 years ago, right before women's activists, women's lobbies, you know, women's groups started to convince people to tinker with the law, right, and tinker with marital law and tinker with family law and all of this stuff, right? So I mean, like, we're looking at traditionalism as if it's like this thing where, like, the wife stays home and she has a dishwasher and a you know, a washer and dryer. She's not like freaking wringing out the clothes with a laundry mangle and then hanging them out in the backyard, right? We're viewing this kind of middle class baby boomer dream of traditionalism that lasted for like 10 years on TV, not in real life so much, but mostly on TV, right? That's what we're looking at as traditionalism. That's not what it was. That's already after 50 years, 100 years rather, of feminists fucking with shit, right? And women still weren't happy. Feminists have been fucking with things and working things in women's favor for 100 years, and women, oh my goodness, it's the problem that has no name, right? Oh, women are so dissatisfied. Women are so upset and unhappy, right? Yeah, why? Because your husband fucking provides you with everything you could possibly want, except self-actualization, because, oh my goodness, that's something you have to get for yourself. Like, fuck.
Oh, we lost Stardust.
What?
Yeah, he dropped out. He'll be back, I'm sure. I mean, he did say that if that happens, he'd come back.
Okay.
Okay, so crap. The rest of my questions are kind of MGTOW. Maybe I'll ask you anyway, Karen, and when he comes in, I'll pose it to him. All right, so Max Darrett, he wrote in and says, seeing as kids grow up best with both male and female parents in the household, what would you say to MGTOW that want kids and want them to grow up healthily, both physically and mentally, but don't want to be in relationships? I don't know
Don't
what the options are.
don't have kids.
Yeah, I guess you can't have them.
Well, no, you can. I mean, women do all the time, right? But I just, like, it's not the best decision, right? I mean, like, yeah, okay, you want kids, right? And you don't want a relationship. Well, pick one. Pick one or the other. Pick kids in a relationship, or pick, you know, no kids and no relationship. I think that I think it's an irresponsible decision on the part of women who make it. I would think that it is an irresponsible decision on the part of men who make it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I like, it's unfortunate, but I mean, you can't always get what you want, right? So,
No. Someone in the chat asks if you're going to be writing any more books, and if you are, if you're going to be doing any nonfiction.
the next book I write will be nonfiction. I'm not planning on writing any more
Erotica?
dirty books. Like, I might actually go to the trouble of writing the last 4,000 words of the novel that I have on my hard drive. But I doubt it. It just kind of, my interest in it fizzled. And so if I write a book now, it won't be a scholarly work. It'll be more of a, um,
Coffee table book?
no, it'll be like a personalized, my journey through anti-feminism type thing. Or my journey through the men's rights movement, or the manosphere, or whatever you want to call it. So it won't be something with like 600 pages of citations and footnotes. It'll be more just my take on things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a shame, because I did enjoy writing fiction, but it's just, it my interest is gone
Ah.
in doing that. So
So you were just talking about how the red pill women is pretty, trad conny, at least in the more contemporary sense. And some people in the chat were saying that they think that PUAs are pretty trad conny too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I was just gonna say, what do you think about that? You think there's a lot of truth there?
Well, okay, I think that PUAs, red pill women, MGTOW, all of them, right, are all of the ones that are sort of based
Oh,
on.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay.
It's not okay. You have no. Anyway, lots of people asking. I just briefly say. So I know it's just nothing to do with the talk, but I live in a nice flat. It's a nice building. Everything I want. A nice neighborhood. My internet sucks though, and the reason why it sucks is because the router is in someone else's flat, and when he's not there or whatever, it can go to shit. And I've been trying to nag the landlord to put the router out in the main area of the house so we can reset it whenever, whatever. Anyway, so it flickers in and out of existence. Considering I make 99% of my income from the internet, it's really annoying when I have to turn down jobs because of that. But anyway, yeah, please. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, no, no.
No, it's okay. We're just filling the space. Actually, you could probably comment on this as well. But Karen, you finished your point.
I was just going to say that I think all of these, not so much MRAs. I think MRAs are in some ways um, not red pill, not traditionalist. I think that if you come up if you define traditionalism as an understanding of the traditional dynamics between men and women, um, and how things are able to work, right? Like the sort of the tried and true how things have worked thus far for thousands of years, how they would work if they're ever going to work in the future. I think that even MGTOW would qualify as traditionalists, not in the sense that they're advocating traditionalism, but in the sense that they're saying, traditionalism as a system is the only one that really I mean, even our system right now operates on traditional values, conservative values of male disposability and female hypergamy and all of these things, right? That they're rejecting that. Um, they're rejecting the whole fucking ball of wax. But essentially, I think that having a traditional view of men and women, right? It's traditional to view women as temptresses, to view women as fickle, to view women as, their affections are fleeting, to view women as valuing certain things in their suitors, to view women as this, that, and the other, and to view men as being expected to have, certain traits and behaviors and all of this other stuff, right? So, it's. I think that the only paradigm right now that is not based on traditionalism, right, that completely flies in the face of it, which is to say, we want to set up a system, right, that is not traditionalist, is the MRM, right? MGTOW are just like, yeah, fuck the system, we don't need a system, right? Because the only one they can see is a traditionalist one. And the red pill women and red pill subreddits and PUAs are, let's exploit traditionalism for our own benefit, whether we're men or women or whatever, right?
Because we can see human nature. I mean, you
Yeah.
can't. I mean, look, people ask me what I think about the MRM. I don't have a horse in the race, but I think give a charitable interpretation is they're too idealistic and they don't want to. Immutable isn't the right word, but there's a certain fixed human nature that really just it doesn't take on new forms, but it kind of is. It's simply molded by the environment. It's not something new though, and so people think that the humans are different now. No, we just have a new environment, and it's the old human nature reacting to it, whatever that environment might be. And yeah, I would actually agree with Karen in that regard. If you want, I mean, call it traditionalism. I like to say recognizing human nature, but of course, yeah,
Yeah.
there's a vast body of ancient literature. I mean, the Bible, the depiction of Eve and just so much more. Um, there's a reason why, old men in white beards wrote about women being temptresses and this and that. And I mean, we can't really publicly talk about it. I mean, you can, but the idea of giving women the vote, I mean, retrospectively, if I could go back in time, I mean, it had some effect. I don't think it was a particularly good idea. Now I wouldn't bother. I just don't care either way. But
Well, the toothpaste out of the tube, right?
yeah, that's why I don't. I
The
mean,
cow's
what's the
been
point
milked.
of
There's no
railing against?
squirt in the cream back up her
Yeah,
udder.
yeah, but
Right.
absolutely. I think that what, to me at least, what people should take away from MGTOW, they don't have to, is that many of us are interested in understanding human nature. For some of us, it's kind of like a scientific endeavor, but at the very least, understanding how human nature as it relates to them as individuals. And people's reactions to MGTOW for being extreme sometimes, I think, are just based on uh, not liking what's being formulated even when it's accurate, because they don't want to hear that, this is the way it is and that's the way that is. Admittedly, sometimes the rhetoric can be harsh, but even if it is harsh, when it's the truth, it's still the truth. I'm not saying it's always the truth, but in those cases where it's harsh and it's the truth, it's the truth. We like to think of ourselves as special snowflakes, and I do have the rare occasion of dealing with sort of social justice warriors and their ilk on the BioWare social network, just because I still like their games for some reason sometimes. And yeah, I see the same thing. I mean, these people are living in a fantasy world. I'm not talking about the video games they play.
Yeah.
They think the world. I mean, I didn't really believe this notion about the things you hear that feminists teach about gender being a social construct until I actually engaged with people who actually believe that.
Yeah.
Like some girl at a Finnish university who's studying something or another, talking about gender being a social construct. And they're totally out to lunch. They have no clue about the way reality works, and they're not particularly interested. I've gotten into so many arguments and received a strike or a warning about it because I claimed that there were certain universal features of human beauty. For example, symmetry, waist hip ratio, and so on. And at the very best, they try to come up with something, some weird culture somewhere where this wasn't the case or what have you. But most of the time, it was just, everyone's an individual and has different. Yeah, I'm not denying that, but
Yeah.
these people are just, and this is the problem, I think.
Yeah, and there are chubby chasers. Oh, yeah, that means that the standard of beauty, tomorrow could turn into 400-pound women. Yeah, no.
Yeah, or the existence of suicide proves that people don't have an instinct to live. I mean, it's silly.
Yeah.
But the thing is that if you're going to be talking about this stuff, and the reason I think why a lot of us talk about this stuff beyond the interest in understanding the world is that we don't want men to end up in a situation that you had illustrated with the guy in Nova Scotia doing the plane flights back and forth. That's devastating. We want men to understand the situation they're in, and men are hurt by this, as we talked about. That they don't like hearing this stuff sometimes,
No,
but
they don't.
It needs to be done for their sake, because put it this way, it's a lot better being quote unquote lonely on your own, keeping your money for yourself, doing what you want, having the freedom to do what you want, than
Being that guy in Nova Scotia.
Exactly.
Well, but one of the things that I come up against a lot is there are men who assume that, well, it hasn't happened to me and therefore it won't ever happen to me, right?
I hear all the time.
And that there's something about me and my ability to judge women, blah blah blah.
Or my
that
women.
means that
my wife isn't like that. I'm insulated against that sort of thing.
Yeah, or even I went through a divorce and my wife didn't ream me, right? Okay, my ex could say that. I went through a divorce and my wife didn't ream me, right? Therefore, it'll never happen, right? And unfortunately, he wouldn't say that because the wife he had previous to me reamed him, right? So he would know better than to say that, or to believe it, right? But for so many men, I think that they have, because maybe it's because of that lack of own group preference and this sort of inability to relate to a common lived male experience. I think that there's plenty of a case for women to sort of believe, maybe even just on the basis of childbirth and pregnancy and lactation, that there is some sort of universal, common, lived female experience. Um, Men don't tend to have that notion. It's not something that they will just accept, that there are commonalities between them, that there are ways that in which they are all vulnerable or all
Except in
affected.
MGTOW, I mean, we openly talk about the stuff that people, frankly, PUAs don't want to talk to me about. These emotional weaknesses that we have, like male mother need,
Yeah.
the feeling of isolation and loneliness, and throughout the years, you're always going to find over and over these aha moments. Yeah, I went through that too, and so it might not be a sort of biological thing, but we can kind of organize. Well, socially, if you will, a means of sharing experiences and becoming aware of these things. And I think the universality of the male experience, at least in the MGTOW context, points out to this isn't just emotional, feely stuff. We're not
No.
making stuff up. We're observing what's happening and saying, there must be a reason for this. Let's try to understand the reason. Oh, here's the reason. Aha. And I wish more men would pay attention. I don't expect that all men start going their own way. That's not plausible and even desirable. I don't care either way. Men should do what they want to do. But I just wish that a lot of these men, the blue pill men, would stop living in this world of fog. I mean, I always say to guys, do what you want to do, and if you want to fuck, even if you want to get married, do it. I would say not. Don't get married, please don't. But if
If you insist.
if you insist, know what you're up against, know what you're getting into, know all these things. You've heard about it, you've learned about it, and whether marriage, dating, the way women interact with men now in great detail, and let that guide you to your own advantage. I mean, there's absolutely a sense of selfishness, and I think it's important to MGTOW. I don't live my life for anyone but myself. Unless I choose to, be generous with someone, I'm certainly not going to share my life with a woman or give her anything I have. And I think it's about time more and more men follow that. I think they'll overall be a lot happier than the dreadful alternative that you named.
Yeah.
All right. I got another question from the
Sure.
chat. Okay. Would you consider going back to making videos of the caliber of the contented and chimeras of meaning over the, say, 15 videos a month that you previously mentioned?
I would. Should I be frank here? Yeah, I'll be frank. I'll be candid. So everyone pay attention. I would love to make videos like that. I really would. Those videos like chimeras of meaning and contented irrationalists and stuff. There are a couple of problems here. I'm not going to lie. My channel makes up a large part of my income. And there's some technicalities with it. Number one, videos like that are almost an hour long, that are well researched and scripted, although I don't think chimeras of meaning was. Anyway, they don't get many views. People don't watch them. That means less AdSense revenue. I hate to say it. We're past the point now whether one should be living off of YouTube or not, but it's a fact that at this point in time, the channel is a large contributor to my income. The other thing is I hate the way Patreon works, because if it were up to me, it would be much more a thing of quality over quantity. I'll get paid whatever at that particular moment the number of patrons or pledges are for a video, whether it's a chimeras of meaning video or not, and it's just difficult to produce those videos. And I could be doing other things like translating a document, not saying that it gets paid really well, or other shit that I do for my income, at the same time that I could be, scripting a video that's end up not really getting me. I need to make a living, and So if that's going to answer your question, I would love to make more of those videos. And actually, I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I do have a project completely unrelated to MGTOW, nothing to do with anything that I'm going to be trying out. And if that's successful, and it's a pretty small chance, potentially I'll be able to cut down production on Thinking-Ape, which is actually a good thing because that would then afford me the opportunity to focus on more detailed scripted research videos. So yeah, I hope that answers that question.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
And okay, the last thing is I asked this of Karen while you were dealing with your router, but I'll throw it in here anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing as kids grow up best with both female and male parents in the household, what would you say to MGTOW that want children and want them to grow up both physically and mentally healthy, but also, have to be faced with the reality of being a man going their own way? I know that there have been conversations about, artificial wombs and things like that. Have you given that
Well,
much thought?
yeah, well, I don't want children, but I mean, I know CS MGTOW put out a good video showing actually, comparatively speaking, how much more successful single fathers are than single mothers. And I don't remember the name of it, but it's a recent one. So, sift through his recent videos, you'll find that. I mean, there is
Oh,
the.
I do want to add though that
Hmm.
there's some selection bias in there because if a crackhead mother can get her kids over a fit father just because of the bias in the court system, then you have the crackhead mothers included in the mother group, and you have only the fittest fathers generally included in the fathers
Yeah, I'm
group.
I'm hardly an expert on this, but
Yeah,
I'd have to double check. But and anyway, well, you might want to check out the video yourself if you haven't watched it. But I think most surrogacy apparently is sometimes an option, but I think it's a very difficult prospect. I mean, if you're fabulously wealthy, I'd put it this way: if I were a multi-millionaire, yeah, maybe I'd have children because that way, and I could find some genetically fit uh, surrogate, pay her a whole bunch of money, hire a bunch of nannies to educate the children, whatever, and then I could say, oh, I've made copies of my genes, I'm so special. But no, that's not the case. I think it's very, very difficult. I actually don't think it's particularly plausible if you're going your own way. I mean, unless it's after the fact. There are a lot of guys who've been, through the cleaners, then they start going their own way. I know a couple of MGTOW single fathers. They're doing pretty well after the fact, but and I think uh, the ideal situation, is to have a functional family, obviously with a man and a woman, but that's becoming less and less plausible as a scenario. So, if you do want a family, that's what's ideal, but the risks are just too great, frankly speaking. I don't think there's a good solution to this, actually, the more I think about it. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's difficult. Um, okay, so I got one last question, and I think this is it's not really related to men going their own way or men's rights or any of this stuff, but it
All
is,
right.
I think, because I think that with the advent of the internet and the ability for us to, have these conversations on YouTube and on forum spaces and various threads and so on, this has allowed a lot of these sort of, this information to circulate. Whereas if we didn't have it, we wouldn't have it at this scope, this
Mm.
amount of knowledge and discourse, and we wouldn't be able to hear these voices and all of that. So you guys are aware of the TPP, or the Trans-Pacific Partnership? That was like a document not unlike the SOPA and PIPA, but it's supposed to be. There's a lot of bad news involved with it. Are you aware of the TPP, Stardusk, or
I'm
Karen?
not. I'm not. No.
Oh,
I know that Stephen Harper signed it,
okay.
and Tom Mulcair, as one of his election promises, was that he would renege on it. And as far as I know, I don't know if Justin Trudeau, our
I
prime
Googled
minister,
it.
our prime minister designate, is going to honor that or not, given that it was signed essentially like in the 11th hour before the election day. But yeah, I'm not really big. I'm not really filled in on exactly what's in there.
Okay, I'm
Go
gonna
ahead.
try to get the short version of what is at stake with the TPP, and there is like for example, well, as an aside, while I'm doing this, you guys are aware that they're talking about creating a subscription base for YouTube called YouTube Red. Do you guys know about
No,
that? So they're basically,
no.
I received a video about that, and I haven't had a chance to watch it, but
yeah, it's something about how people are going to have to pay subscriptions to put up content on YouTube. For larger for people who are sort of like get partnerships, so it may not affect smaller channels. It probably won't. But all right, so this is the TPP thing. Last week, WikiLeaks released the final text of the TPP's intellectual property rights chapter, and it is absolutely terrifying. These are just a few of its most dangerous pieces. Okay? 1. Compel ISPs to take down websites without any sort of court order, just like SOPA. 2. Extend the U.S. copyright regime to require copyrights stand for life plus 70 years, preventing anyone from using works that belong in the public domain. 3. Criminalize whistleblowing by extending trade secret laws without any mandatory exemptions for whistleblowers or investigative journalists. 4. And end anonymity online by forcing every domain name to be associated with a real name and a real address. Then 5. Make it illegal to work to unlock, modify, or generally tinker with a device that you own. 6. Export the U.S.'s broken copyright policies to the rest of the world without expanding any of the free speech protections such as fair use. So the reason why
Sounds horrible.
yeah, it does, right? And the reason why I brought it up is because the fact that we're operating. I mean, the Wild West of the internet is basically they're trying to wrangle it in. They're trying to take control. And I know there's like several different parties that are interested in doing this. You have you have government that's essentially just trying to get more power and influence. And it sounds from what the TPP, what I read from just these little footnotes, it's mostly just the U.S. government that's doing this. Although they're probably partnered with other governments.
Doesn't surprise me. My former, or no, it's still my government is. Are you American or Canadian?
I'm American.
Yeah. So, well, I can give you a similar. I mean, it's not. Now we're on topic. The United States government is the IRS specifically. There's this thing called birthright tax. So you have to basically, depending on your income, pay taxes in 2 different countries. They enacted this thing called FATCA, and it's an acronym, and I'm going to just double check what it stands for first. But basically, the U.S. government has threatened foreign governments effectively, basically forcing banks in those countries to reveal personal information about Americans with accounts or what have you there, under a threat of penalty of over 30 or even 33% on all transactions in the United States. So this doesn't, the sort of thing you're talking, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, right? Threatening Canada, other countries. The government is completely out of control, and it's something. In the case of this, what I just mentioned, this is just clearly a case of we got the guns. This is all, we got the guns. You better fucking do this. Threatening other countries, threatening foreign financial institutions. They're getting desperate.
Well, we've got the guns. We've got the ability to decide that we're going to put a massive tariff, essentially, on any business that you do with any American. And we'll do it. No, we'll do it because it's going to hurt you more than it hurts us because our economy is bigger and whatnot.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like as far as what you mentioned, Brian, and as far as the terms of the TPP. I mean, the only one that I don't have a particular problem with is the elimination of anonymity on the internet.
Yeah.
I personally right? And even not just from a personal perspective, because I'm out under my real name, and you know, there's this thing called the white pages that doxes me all the time. Um, you know, because I have random people from like freaking Bangladesh and fucking, you know, Tennessee calling me and saying thank you so much for doing what you do on my phone, on my home phone, right? Like it's not hard to find me. Um, but it's not just because of that. I think that if it was blanket across the board, and this is really the thing, it would have to be a blanket across the board thing, so that not just the people who own the website, but you know, every single Twitter egg account, right? Every single blogger account, every single you know, YouTube account that's been in existence for one day that's servicing manhood academies like freaking army of sock puppets, right? Would be attached to a real name and a real address, right? Everybody, all the feminists, all the MRAs, all the everybody, right? If it was blanket across the board, I think I could live with that.
Well, the other stuff doesn't sound particularly appealing.
No, the other
I
stuff, the other
wonder.
stuff is fucked up.
I wonder how plausible that is. I mean, as you pointed out. I mean, I guess the internet's kind of like the Wild West. I wonder if it's tameable. I mean, I don't know if it can be tamed in the same way.
Well, I mean, some of
Uh,
it, some of what they said is reactionary, right? Some of it, of what they said is like fear mongering because,
hmm.
oh, it'll impose U.S. copyright law onto, you know, other people and therefore, you know, without any increase in fair use, you know, blah blah blah. Everybody on YouTube already operates under
I was
U.S.
going to say
copyright
that.
law,
Yeah, yeah. I
and
was going to say that.
everybody
Yeah.
operates under U.S. ideas of fair use. So if you're okay with how YouTube handles copyright and fair use, then you probably won't have a problem with that.
No. Although, I mean, is Brian, how much do you know about the subscription thing that you mentioned?
Oh no, I haven't watched the video about YouTube Red yet, so I don't know much. I just saw it like last night, and I just heard that they're
Mhm.
bringing a subscription, you know, system to YouTube for um, YouTubers that have partnerships, like the larger ones. So
Right.
I'm not sure how that's going to affect the smaller ones. You know, I think
Is
they're,
that
I'm
anybody
concerned.
like because a YouTube partnership just means that you are making money on ad revenue. You have to have a you are a YouTube partner if you put ads on your channel. If you
Technically,
put
yeah,
ads
but
on
I think what they, unless some, I mean, they're also official partners. For example, I have a gaming channel now. I have a partner there who takes 40% of the minuscule ad revenue I get off of that, and that's for the
yeah,
privilege of being able to
machinima
post, yeah, things
yeah.
like that, copyrighted video game material, because you know that they protect you in that regard. But
Yeah.
so maybe that's what they're talking about. I don't really
Yeah,
know, but
maybe like the Grace Network and all these other fucking people. Like, I get spammed in my email and in my YouTube message box, like fucking 10 emails a week from people who are saying, join our YouTube partnership network. We'd like to invite you to be a partner. And I just ignore them
it's
because,
no,
yeah.
it makes it's there's no financial incentive whatsoever. You just lose money, and it's pointless. But
If you know, honestly, they might be able to get me more views. They might, but it's not worth it to me if I have to give up any sort of autonomy whatsoever,
yeah, that's really
as
important.
to what I can say. And so if there's any kind of, you know, oh yeah, no, we don't want you to say that. You know, I am looking into going into an actual private partnership with Steven Crowder and Gavin McGinnis and maybe Milo Yiannopoulos and a couple other people. Um, to do a website where we all post our videos and our blog posts and all of that, and sort of collaborate on advertising and promotion and stuff like that, right? And
Mm.
we want to get a few people. I've suggested Sargon of Akkad and a few people who lean more to the left and all of that because I don't want to be necessarily part of a right wing website, you know. Um, but I want a balance of political viewpoints if I'm going to be part of this. I mean, and we're looking into doing this just on our own. Um, but I would totally be down for that. And yet, like that's something completely different. That's I would still be able to say whatever the fuck I want.
That's really
it's not
important to
like
be able to
yeah.
say whatever the fuck you want. I mean, in some ways, related to MGTOW, I'm kind of happy that MGTOW is small fries. Generally speaking, we tend to fly under the radar. Not always, but generally speaking. So, uh,
Yeah, I
the
mean, I don't know that it's gonna affect like the MGTOW groups or the
mm,
but I'm the reason why I was concerned specifically with the TPP stuff is I think that we're living in a really unique time. It's almost like we're entering like another enlightenment where people are having these political discussions, these cultural discussions, philosophical ones online in various spaces on the internet, and we're learning a lot more that from each other, from sources that we otherwise could not have possibly accessed because they're coming.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Mm.
and we're
Well,
getting
and,
it.
and the American Constitution was essentially written, when AOL became like a household thing, right? And now it's starting to erode, just like the American Constitution did. Um, you know, uh, they're adding amendments and removing things and exemptions and this, that, and the other, and over time it just starts to, but because we're living in an age of information moving over milliseconds, it didn't take as long.
Well, I mean, I'm not an optimist by any means. Don't mistake this for optimism, but I'd like to think that people's greed, or say in the case of Google or whatever, whoever else runs different things, they recognize that creative free expression has great potential in terms of profitability, that maybe they'd be less inclined to encroach on that and limit that possibly.
Hmm.
No,
Oh,
I don't
and
know.
I also have some information about YouTube Red. Somebody in the chat just said YouTube Red is about $10 a month, and what it does is it will remove ads. Partners will be able to put premium content behind a paywall. So essentially, you will be able to make content that's behind a paywall if you wanted to. It's like Hulu
I don't
Plus.
want to do that.
I
Why?
don't think I'd do that either.
I don't understand why anybody would want to do that. Unless they were like running webinars for profit or something like that. But honestly, like I think that if people had to pay money, even if people had to pay like 50 cents to view one of my videos,
They're not going to do it.
they'd just click away.
Yeah, that's it's bad. Yeah, I mean they're. I mean, here's the proof in the pudding. I mean, in my case, something like 98. I got something a little over 14,000 subs now. Something like 98 point something percent of my subs have never given me a dime in terms of donations. I'm not criticizing them for that. I'm just stating matter of factly.
Hmm.
These are given those statistics. I mean, how many of those people, if they actually had to pay to watch a video, would actually watch a video? I mean, so I'd basically have no subs.
Oh,
So
you even got people who are like, fuck it, I got ad block, like because
yeah,
they can't
yeah.
even like sit
Oh, I
through the
suspect
4 seconds.
a lot of my subs use ad block, even though I've asked them
Yeah,
not
no,
to. It's up to them.
and
But
they know that when they sit through when they choose not to sit through that 5 seconds before they can skip the ad, they're depriving you of like 30 cents, right? And okay, so turn off that pesky ad block, as Mundane Matt likes to say, but and that's why I don't have ad block, is because when I watch the channels that I enjoy, I want them to be able to profit from my custom.
I do. But when I watch something that I like Barbarossa or you or whatever, I'll turn off. Like if I watch
Yeah.
PewDiePie, I have ad block on. Not that I watch PewDiePie.
Well, the
Well,
guy doesn't
sometimes.
need any more money, right?
Right, right. But if someone I like, I'll turn it off. I'll intentionally turn it off, and but yeah, that's a silly model. No one. That's not going to help anyone. I guess it was kind of the alarmist in me was a bit worried about some new thing, but yeah.
I could see maybe like Stanford University like putting a $1 paywall on all of their lectures,
Oh
right?
yeah, fair enough. The
Something
Zapolsky
like
ones are
that,
really
right?
good.
Oh, they are. They're
Yeah, like
amazing. Actually, I got into a massive internet row with somebody on a Noah Plum 99 video just yesterday,
Okay.
and trying to convince him to watch those videos because he kept on demanding answers from me, and I'm like, well, why don't you watch this video and then you'll know my point
I
of
need to
view.
rewatch them. I watched them so long ago, but they're really quite good, very informative, and he's a good lecturer. So
Oh, he is. No, he's funny. He's got a good sense of humor and he's very wry and dry and deadpan and all of those things. And he's just a very he's got a very good way of actually getting the message, the what he's trying to teach across in a like he's not your typical like he's not like 90% of my teachers when I was in school who I would rather stab myself repeatedly in the head with a toasting fork rather than sit through another 10 minutes of them.
yeah,
No, he's engaging and he's interesting and he's funny and he's wry and he's he's witty and he's sarcastic and yeah. So
all right.
Mr. Shiba, you know anything?
No, I think
That
we're
is kind of a creepy
good.
picture, I gotta admit. Yeah.
I'm pretty
well,
optimistic
it's
as far as the
it's
YouTube.
creepy. It's a creepy avatar because it's moving and talking.
Oh well,
Yeah.
I wouldn't. I'm not too worried about the YouTube thing because I think that even if they like did something really totalitarian and messed up, some other service would just spring out. Like Vimeo would suddenly become an option.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would because that's the thing about the internet. As long as it's as long as we have that model as it is, there is no space that's going to try and become the dominant force. But
Yeah.
what happened to Google Plus? I mean, it's still around, but is it really? I mean, nobody really uses it. So.
Hmm.
Well, I don't use Facebook either. I don't use Facebook. I don't use Google Plus. I mean, like I have a Facebook page that I never go to, and when my renter like sends me messages, oh, the new password for your rent is, when you accept the email is this, and she sends it over a Facebook message, and like I'm like typing in the old password, going, what the fuck is going? Because I never check that. Um, so essentially, it's like. I never got into Google Plus. I never got into, um, into Facebook. I never got into Twitter, Instagram, any of those things. If I had to, I suppose I would, but I don't have to.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
Well, I'm
So
gonna. What? I'm sorry. To start us, did you want to? Did you have
No,
some?
I'm pretty much done, sir.
Okay. Well, yeah. We'll wrap it up. Thanks for coming on.
No,
And yeah.
pleasure.
No. That. Thank you. Hopefully we can have you on again. And thank you, Karen. Um,
Yep.
no, no, no. Thank you. It was nice to talk to you again, Stardusk.
We like to talk to each other, so it's always good to talk to you again.
There you
And
go.
yeah, so um,
all right.
yeah,
Guys, we're gonna take off. If you guys have any thoughts, please leave a comment and please consider. Speaking of Patreon, going to our Patreon at patreon.com/honeybadgerradio.